Frozen grain here and there, frozen grain everywhere. Searching all around for the film grain. All over 4K UHD, freeze the grain. They got the grain management to freeze the film grain's life. The grain will get that freeze for trifling with frozen grain. That's it. 100 honors and 90 below. Nicely done, raw 4K scan. I have to give it to you. Afraid I must leave you for a few minutes. Order a round of my chit, mastering engineer. Right. Damn it all. Must you always break off at this time? Sorry, General Video. My fan base is a creature of habit. I get a call for a rewatch every day at this time. Anyway, hurry back before the video cards get cold. 20 minutes. And don't try doctoring any 4K masters for me while I'm away. Bless you, raw 4K master. Hurry, man, hurry! Get away, quick! Mono 62 mix, Mono 62 mix, Mono 62 mix. Calling 007 fans. How do you hear me? Over. 007 fans London. 007 fans London. Receiving you. Over. Stand by to transmit. Wait. Out. Ah! Here. Excuse me, sir. Are you a member? No, I'm looking for Mr. Damnful Idealistic Crusader. Video carte. Neuf à la banque. I need another film to mess with. I admire your courage, company. Digital. Lowry Digital. I despise your nerdy research, Mr. Crusader. Damnful idealistic Crusader. Mr. Crusader, I suppose you wouldn't care to, raise the video limit? I have no objections. Now. Looks like you're out to get me. It's an idea at that. 8 wrecked video masters. Neuf à la banque. Excuse me, sir. Thank you, Andre. I must pass the shoe. Sanjay, I hope you'll forgive me, but it's most important. Well, see if he's there, will you? Crusader, where on earth have you been? I've been searching forums for you. DFIC is here, sir. He'll see you in a minute. Video penny. What gives? Me, given an ounce of encouragement. You never take me to disc releases looking like this, Crusader. You never take me to disc releases, period. I would, you know. Only Film M would have me court-martialed for illegal use of film government property. Flattery will get you nowhere, but don't stop trying. What's all this to do about? Dr. No, and it looks serious. We've been burning the air between here and Los Angeles for the last 3 hours. Oh, in you go. Don't forget to write. Good evening, sir. It happens to be 3 a.m. When do you sleep, Crusader? Never when I'm reviewing a disc, sir. Dr. No went off the air tonight just like that. Right in the middle of the opening procedure. We've checked up and the raw 4K scan has disappeared. So is his monomix. It was supposed to be a new restoration. We'd only just sent it out. Well, was the raw 4K scan on something, special? He was checking an inquiry from the Bond fans. They've been complaining about massive interference with their physical media releases. They think it comes from the Los Angeles studio area. Does revisionism mean anything to you? A little. It's throwing what could have been an archival restoration off balance with all kinds of new revisionist practices in picture and sound or something, isn't it? More or less. Millions of dollars worth of flawed restorations ending up on flawed physical media releases is bad enough. Now they're going to try to restore the entire James Bond series. You're booked on the 7 o'clock plane to Los Angeles. That gives you exactly 3 hours, 22 minutes. I'll have a set of video background papers to date delivered to you at the airport in a self-destructive bag. You can study them during the flight. I want to know what's happened to the raw 4K scan. Now, Mr. Warner Jones, talk fast before your friend doubles back. Who are you working for? I don't know what you're talking about. I was just sent to meet you at the airport. Ah, but by whom? By Video Government House. I don't think so. Both hands on the wheel, Mr. Warner Jones. I'm a very nervous disc reviewer. Receipt from Warner Laboratories. Transfer studies a hobby of raw 4K scans? Not that I know of, no. All the people down 4K town, you know all the people go Atmos. Waving sound about destroying in and out. It's so easy to remix in Atmos. Take a pretty mono mix, make it dead, and then revise again in Atmos. Hold it very tight and all for the UHD, you'll be doing the Atmos. Atmos, Atmos, bad remix, Atmos, Atmos, bad remix, sound revisionism, never get a mono restoration, Atmos hell! Together! Atmos, Atmos, bad remix, Atmos, Atmos, bad remix, sound revisionism, never get the mono restoration, Atmos hell! Look, you are talking about Warner UHD. What's so special about it? Why can't we go over there? It belongs to a studio character. You won't allow anyone to land. I had our naval reconnaissance planes take a look. They found nothing but a studio UHD, low-effort HDR transfer setup. There's nothing illegal about that. That Warner UHD scares me plenty. Friends of mine went out there once after film scans. Only trouble, they never came back again. None of the local video men will go near the place. Commander Raw 4K Scan and me, we slip in at night. He takes some samples and we came straight back again. Don't do for a man to hang about there.
What kind of samples?
Oh, bits of picture, audio, extras.
I see. Warner UHD begins to interest me. What else do we know about this studio gentleman?
Nothing much, except his name, Dr. Warner MGM.
Morning, engineer.
Mr. Crusader, anything I can do for you?
Oh yes, I came across this in Raw 4K Scan's office. Your receipt.
Yes, that's right.
Can you tell me anything about it?
Poor old Raw 4K Scan. Bit of a bug of his, this amateur videology. He brought some transfer samples into me for testing, convinced they were valuable.
And were they?
No, of course not. Just low-grade old files.
Can I see them?
Well, no, I threw them away.
Well, have you any idea where he found them?
No, he didn't say.
Warner UHD, perhaps?
Definitely not.
Why so certain?
Not videologically possible.
Thank you very much indeed, engineer. It's very kind of you to spare me so much of your time.
You're very welcome, Mr. Crusader.
Oh, engineer, allow me.
Hello and welcome back to this damnful idealistic crusade. In this video I will be reviewing Dr. No on UHD from the new 4K Master and Restoration with Dolby Vision HDR that is only being sold in the Sean Connery 6-film collection UHD set, which has been released by Warner Brothers in cooperation with MGM Amazon and of course Eon Productions. This is available in a standalone set with just the disc in a keep case, but also in a more elaborate steelbook set that merely contains the same UHD disc. Now I'm breaking up this review into a separate video on each film as there is so much ground to cover and each film has been handled in different ways with different problems that it really requires focusing on one film at a time, because you also have to at points discuss how they've been handled over the years and how this is finally getting away from 19 years of the crap Lowry Digital masters that we've been stuck with since the 2006 Ultimate Edition DVDs, and those affected the films in different ways because they were handled in different ways. And on Dr. No, it was a 4K scan done back around 2004-2005 that was then hit with all of the patented Lowry Digital processes that manipulated the film like mad, in addition to creating a brand new 5.1 terribly revisionist remix of the film's audio and overprocessing the film's original mono track. So to hear that the original films were finally getting a new master and new release, let alone from a new restoration, even though they won't tell us any of the details about it, it was absolutely astonishing to hear. We've been cursed by the terrible Lowry Digital masters for 19 years now, and then their eventual HD upgrades on Blu-ray merely exacerbated the problems and made them all the more glaringly obvious. Some were even upgrades to the DVD iterations of the masters, and some were even newer scans, seemingly without Lowry's involvement. So the Blu-rays themselves are a mixed bag of transfers from different eras, and they all have their own problems. So getting all of this stuff right in a new restoration and master and release on a new format is the most important thing you could do. That has not happened, and the level of care these films require, as being arguably the most popular film series in the history of the cinematic medium, has not happened. So getting the transfers right and getting the picture and sound right to not only maximize the potential of a 4K master with HDR, but also have a proper UHD release that is properly made to the highest quality standards of the UHD format, in addition to not having any picture or sound problems, seeing as every release of these films has not been done to the highest quality standard it could be, and finding a release that could be called archival is practically impossible. Unfortunately, we're talking about the Warner Studio label, who does not do these things, and it seems like they're the ones who carried out the technical work in terms of the scanning and processing and restoration work, not to mention, of course, the disc encoding and final presentation. Of course, that's only us guessing because, as usual, we're not being told anything about the restoration process except for getting one confirmed statement that all of the original series was restored in 2024 at Warner Brothers, it seems, with the cooperation and involvement of MGM Amazon. But again, who exactly did what or how this was done, nobody knows. All we know is that the rest of the films should be coming out in relatively short order, probably centered around actor-specific box sets. Each of them will be a new 4K master that is different from the pre-existing older 4K SDR masters that have turned up on streaming and never got a physical media release. And these new 4K masters are not only from new scans of the films, but also will have Dolby Vision HDR in addition to brand new Dolby Atmos remixes of the films. So what does that mean for the original Sean Connery era of the films from the 1960s, and specifically what does that mean for Dr. No? Now, normally in these reviews I talk about the film because of course that's the most important thing, but this is one of my technical reviews where I have to go into just how corner cutting and bad a release is and how it cannot be called archival at all. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the actual film, I have recorded an audio commentary which you can listen to if you want to hear my extremely nerdy babblings about why I think Dr. No is a masterpiece and is one of the best films in the series. In order to understand the importance of this new 4K master, you have to look at the versions of Dr. No we've been stuck with for almost 20 years now. And that means going back to the Lowry Digital master with MiCasa Studios 5.1 Remix that was first released in the Ultimate Edition DVD line in 2006. This was done from a 4K scan of the original negative and processed to within an inch of its life in terms of degraining the film and then adding back some sort of grain to give it a slight texture by messing with the contrast, by messing with the color, by trying to increase the sharpness of the original photography, by trying to mess with the clarity of the original photography. So they were basically doing all that they could to make the image pop on a display of that time period and sort of wow people with the degree of how sharp and amazing it looked. None of this was proper film restoration or preservation, and it wasn't the image as originally photographed and exhibited theatrically in 1962. So when you look at the Lowry Master today, you can look at it in HD 1080p on the Blu-ray version, and it's really going to magnify these problems. You'll note that the film looks significantly grain managed is the term now, but it also has quite a number of examples of the terrible frozen grain effect where everything locks into place and moves around, but because it's a 2006 master, it's really bad, and it looks like people have a very shimmering, almost Vaseline halo around them, and it looks quite digital looking. It's really bad when it happens, but it's only sporadically throughout the transfer. But you can tell that the original grain field is not what it once was. It has been manipulated and possibly completely degrained, and then they add some sort of grain plate in after the fact in terms of after their cleanup work. Now, with the advent of 4K televisions and this new 4K scan, the Lowry Master is being seen more and more for just how bad it was and how it manipulated the image. The only real positives were, of course, it was giving us new restoration work. It was giving us something that wasn't derived from the old MGM Video Master that dates back to the 1990s, and it presented the film in the 1.66 to 1 aspect ratio. That ratio is arguably the most comfortable for the film, but there have been debates for a long time about what the intended aspect ratio was, and of course it would have varied depending on seeing the film in Europe or the UK versus the US, where typically the standard was 1.85 to 1. 1.75 to 1 was what Criterion used as the framing of their Laserdisc, and that is the new framing on the UHD release. So it's a film where you can have a couple different ratios, and most prints were at least somewhat hard matted, but also somewhat open. So I've seen it even in something that's a non-theatrical style ratio of like 1.55 to 1, which is more of what the initial MGM letterbox Laserdisc presentation gave a generous framing of. So the photography of the film is so well done that you could have it at a number of aspect ratios and not lose important visual information so long as the person doing the transfer actually paid attention to actually matting each shot properly and not losing anything in the process, as some versions have unfortunately done. But I do like the 1.66 to 1 framing, and if I had to choose one that I thought worked best and didn't cramp any shots, I do think that is probably the best overall, even if it may not necessarily have been the original theatrical aspect ratio. But so long as you're seeing the film in 1.66, 1.75, or 1.85, it's going to be one of the ratios that could have been used theatrically. Although I do think 1.85 is a little bit too tight, so 1.75 is probably the best compromise ratio. In terms of the original mono track that was on the Ultimate Edition DVD release of the Lowry Master, it is the original mono mix, but it is not a fully untouched or fully restored version. Basically, it's another version of the MGM mastering that was done for their letterbox laserdisc that first came out in their Connery collection on LD in the early 1990s, and then that was later tweaked and processed and noise reduced a little bit when they did the refresh, what I like to term the THX remasters of the James Bond films in the mid-1990s. Those first turned up on VHS, and then later there was a standalone Laserdisc and DVD release in 1998, which you can see here. So these contained a slightly more processed version of the early 1990s slightly processed mastering of the mono track. So basically what's on the Ultimate Edition DVD is the 1998 mastering of the mono mix. It's not terrible, but it's also not what it could be because it's a remastered version of a remastered version. It did not sound the way it should have, and it did not have its full original fidelity intact, which is truly unfortunate as the original mono sound mixes of the initial 1960s James Bond films were intricately mixed by the entire sound team, along with Norman Wanstall and, of course, editor Peter Hunt and everybody in the Pinewood sound department. They had a punchiness and an aggressive quality to their mixing in terms of the loudness and levels of the sound effects and the music cues and everything to have a certain punchiness that made the film stand out even more. So even the sound design, although they were single-channel mono mixes and, of course, originally much lower budgeted films, the aggressive punchiness of the sound mixes were part of the James Bond formula. It made them stand out. So when you mess with that, that messes with the original experience, and you have to go through quite a lot of work to get the original mono mix of Dr. No sounding the way it did originally with its best fidelity. MiCasa Studios was the company hired to do all the 5.1 remixes for the Lowry Masters, and since the first three James Bond films do not have their original stems surviving and don't have all the master materials, all they had to work with was basically the original mono mix itself, and then a surviving isolated music and effects track, which is mono and not fully matching the film edits. There are different bits of music, different parts of Monty Norman's score, and other little differences, so you can't just use that and expect it to match the film. And then, of course, there's Monty Norman's soundtrack, but there's no soundtrack master of that, as the soundtrack album was merely different recordings of some of the calypso music. So it means you're very much limited to what you can do with the first three films. So what MiCasa did was basically take the original mono mix and try to spread it around in a 5.1 container and try to make it a multi-channel experience through a lot of trickery and gimmicky attempts to move the mono mix around and split it up here and there and use a couple little elements around the whole track. It's just a terrible listening experience. Plus, it's extremely noise reduced and filtered, and then you add in how it's cut up and spread around a 5.1 listing environment. It's really terrible, and it should be completely avoided. They would also add in new sound effects here and there throughout all of their remixes, which were all terrible, and some were straight out of generic sound effects libraries. So the MiCasa 5.1 remixes that were done for the Lowry Masters, whether it's the really limited ones on the first three films or any of the others that expressly added a ton of new crappy sound effects as well, they're all to be avoided. As I mentioned, when the Blu-ray Blu-ray came out, it was merely a 1080p upgrade of the same crap Lowry Digital master from the Ultimate Edition, and now the terrible MiCasa 5.1 remix was given a lossless codec and DTS HDMA. On the Blu-ray release, the mono track, you would think, would just be the same 1998 mastering as the 2006 DVD had, but unfortunately that didn't happen. What somebody did was hit the track with so much noise reduction that they made the original audio sound quite muffled and dead in a lot of places, removing a lot of detail, a lot of ambiance. A lot of scenes now have a certain quiet dead quality to them in terms of the rest of the sound of the room or the environment. It's not 100% destructive, but it's pretty darn close, and it is the worst sounding version of the film's original audio on any release to that point, except for maybe the very first masterings from the early 1980s on the initial CBS Fox releases and others. But honestly, I can understand why the initial releases sound the way they do. They were using worn prints that had cuts and splices and damage and hum and all kinds of stuff, so I have no issue with the initial early masterings sounding the way they do. So technically, I think the Blu-ray mastering of the original mono mix is the worst version of the mono mix because there's no excuse for it sounding that bad. And to make matters worse, only the Region A Blu-rays retained the original audio track options that were presented. So everyone else, especially in the United Kingdom, would get the Blu-rays of the same masters, but only with the terrible MiCasa remixes. So for well over a decade now, in the UK and most everywhere else in the world, unless you have the Region A Blu-ray releases or older releases of the films, you could only see the films with the crap remix audio. Honestly, I think the only real positive of the Ultimate Edition line and then the later Blu-ray line, basically reissuing those, was that a lot of new extras were generated for the 2006 DVD sets, and they were 2-disc affairs, so compression and other issues that were a problem on the special edition DVDs were no longer a thing, and then the new extras were fantastic, so each film now has a substantial supplements program. When it came time for the Blu-rays, the producers of the documentaries, being John Cork and Bruce Sibley and that whole group, were able to upgrade at least some of the documentaries and extras for some of the films to HD resolution, and this meant literally rebuilding those from their original interview recordings and then adding new HD images and adding new clips from the then current crappy Lowry Digital transfers. So that's why you have some of the films with their original extras prepared and made in 2006, but on the Blu-ray and UHD releases, some of them are suddenly in HD. So that work was done for the Blu-rays, but unfortunately due to budgetary limitations, they couldn't do all of the films, so that's why only some are upgraded in that sense. Now, sometime in the early to mid-2010s, there were 4K masters prepared from new scans, which were only completed in standard dynamic range. These have been shown on and off at various theatrical events as DCPs and were finally released to streaming services in limited capacities. All of these show marked improvements over the Blu-ray releases of the films in terms of image fidelity, color timing, and such, but they were only released on streaming and would appear and disappear sporadically, sometimes being replaced by the old Lowry Digital masters once more, and there was no way to actually get a physical version because they were never released. So now to talk about the UHD, what we're looking at is a brand new 4K scan for each film, apparently done in 2024 at Warner Brothers, so I would guess it's Warner MPI who did the work. Again, this is just me guessing because they don't actually tell us anything about the work done. And I have to say, I think the new scan itself is excellent. I was very pleased at how it turned out in terms of the scan itself before anybody got around to messing with it. So I have no issues with that, and that's typically my experience with every Warner release, whether it's a UHD or a Blu-ray or Warner Archive title. Warner MPI does fantastic scan work. It's what happens after that that becomes the problem. So on all of the Connery films, I think the source scans are excellent. I think after that, your mileage definitely varies at how well things have been handled. So in terms of the picture quality of the Dr. No UHD, I unfortunately have to say this is the worst and most problematic of the 6 films in this set due to how it was handled. The new scan itself is excellent, and had somebody else handled this who would have taken the time to actually care about getting the transfer right and doing the best that they could, especially a boutique label like Arrow Video or somebody else, this would have been stupendous. But unfortunately, on this Warner presentation, you have a beautiful new scan of the negative and surviving elements with very good, surprisingly good color timing throughout that avoids a lot of the issues of past masterings. That is practically ruined by incessant frozen grain. Now, frozen grain is a particular effect that typically rears its ugly head due to overzealous grain management, but also is something that is more and more common to Warner 4K masters on Blu-ray and UHD. It's really something that's picked up more and more in the past couple years, and you see it on most every Warner release somewhere. It was an issue in the old crap Lowry Digital master, but it was also sporadic and very digital looking and very obvious when it happened. Here on this 4K master of Dr. No, the frozen grain is the variety where the entire grain field will lock up and move around with people, and so it may not be visible or very noticeable to most, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is very clearly there. It's just never the extremely obvious shimmering digital sort of halo it was on the Lowry Digital master. Now, with a Warner release, I typically expect this to pop up here and there, and if I see it, I'm going to say something, because any sign of this is unacceptable in a 4K transfer, let alone a supposed 4K restoration. I think the frozen grain artifact is hideous to begin with, and any sign of it's a big red flag. But in Dr. No, it starts in the opening gun barrel when Bob Simmons does the iconic first turn and fire. Then it runs through the title sequence. It's even on the three blind mice as they're walking in the end of the title sequence. And then when we cut to the actual film of the three blind mice and the establishing shots, they've got the frozen grain halos on them. So it basically is in the opening gun barrel all the way through the film nonstop, until we get to just after the introduction of Honey Rider and we get into the jungle trek into Crab Key. It may still be there after that, but with everything else being a jungle background and then inside of Dr. No's fortress, it's just not really visible. I couldn't fully discern it still being there, but I had the suspicion it probably still was in a few spots, but it is certainly there and plain as day for the majority of the film, and that in and of itself is unacceptable and means that this disc should be recalled so the transfer can be properly redone, so that is not a problem. Typically, Warner UHDs will have this problem in a few scenes or a couple shots, and this will even happen in some of their high-profile restorations of large format titles. This happened sporadically a few times in North by Northwest, which I thought was unacceptable, and then in their restoration of The Searchers, it happened consistently, which was truly unacceptable and made that restoration very painful to sit through, because you have the visual splendor of John Ford and VistaVision continually wrecked by awful frozen grain artifacts. But never before have I seen a Warner UHD disc that had frozen grain this consistent, this bad, this non-stop for most of the feature. In fact, it's a relief when all of a sudden you can't notice it anymore. And again, that could just be because the backgrounds are obscuring it to a degree. Thankfully, the frozen grain is not this big of a problem with the other 5 films, but it does rear its ugly head in some spots of From Russia with Love, and it does also happen sporadically throughout the entire transfer of Thunderball. But never is it as consistent and as bad as it is in Dr. No, and this factor alone makes Dr. No the worst disc in the set for a picture quality perspective, because any instance of frozen grain in an iconic film that has been given a brand new modern scan and restoration is unacceptable. But for it to run from the opening gun barrel through the majority of the feature non-stop is just absolutely unacceptable. It's as if no one was paying attention or cared to double check things, let alone have a quality control check, something that is anathema to the Warner Studio division. And I will touch on all of these again when I get to the film's audio, which is an even greater problem, and the real reason why I think this disc needs to be recalled. The frozen grain problem is such a shame because the overall picture quality in terms of what this new scan is giving you and just how deeply it reveals the tomfoolery and shenanigans going on in the Lowry Digital Master and underlines just how bad that's been for almost 20 years. It's such a shame that this great new scan has been ruined in this way with this terrible frozen grain throughout. Because I think, as I've alluded to before, the new color timing is extraordinarily good. I was very surprised because I was going into all of these on pins and needles hoping they didn't screw everything up, and I was happy that the first two films in particular really got the color timing, I think, extraordinarily well done. It may not be 100% there, but I think it's very close. And of the 6 Connery films on UHD, I thought the color timing and appearance of Dr. No and From Russia with Love were the most dramatic improvements over how bad they were on the Lowry Digital Masters, which had some real definite issues with how they handled the color timing, which did not even try to approximate how they looked on original 1960s dye transfer Technicolor prints. Here on the Dr. No UHD, not only is the color timing an improvement, but so are the day for night shots, which have been handled a variety of different ways, and day for night is always very tricky to handle in terms of trying to get it just right, trying to match the original photography and how it was printed and the release prints, and trying to reflect how the effect was achieved in the first place, because every time it was done and processed, it would be done and handled in different ways. So you have to work really hard at trying to approximate it as best you can. And past releases have tried a number of things, and none have ever really been satisfactory. But here, I think it has been done quite well, and I was pleased that it was an improvement over past masters and how they handled the day for night shots. Thankfully, and quite surprisingly for a Warner release, the HDR is relatively tasteful here on Dr. No. There's not an extreme amount of nit usage, which is something Warner will do to most every catalog title they touch. So I was really, frankly, terrified at what Warner might do with their tendencies to overdo the HDR like crazy on their catalog titles. So here on Dr. No, again, the nit usage is low, and we are looking at a Dolby Vision presentation, which is something Warner typically never does on their regular releases. I think the only reason this has Dolby Vision is that it's another title they are handling for MGM, which is why the Warner UHD release of the Terminator AI Upscale Master actually does have Dolby Vision HDR, because had they just done it themselves, it would have been only HDR10, as are all of their regular studio UHD releases. So when you're looking at this release in Dolby Vision, the HDR enhancement is tasteful. It's never overzealous, but there are perhaps one or two moments longtime viewers might notice of having some elements of the frame be just a little bit brighter, and it's overall a different sort of experience because we've never had a modern high-resolution scan with very nicely done color timing that also has HDR. So in certain ways, it's like seeing the film with fresh eyes, and it does take a little bit of getting used to, especially if you've been looking at the crap Lowry Master for the past 19 years. This will be an absolute eye-opener to get away from that terrible piece of junk. Now, as I mentioned, the new transfer is framed at 1.75 to 1, which is possibly what it was originally exhibited at in British and European theaters. This framing was used before by Criterion on their Laserdisc release back in 1991, so it is understandable why it would be chosen as the ratio for the new scan restoration in UHD. I don't have a problem with 1.75 being used, and the framing here is quite well done. There's not really any issues with cramped shots. There's only one very brief shot where the top of Sean Connery's head is obscured by the top of the frame. That's where Bond backs into Felix Leiter during their introduction scene. That's just naturally where Connery's body moved, and so in terms of framing the film at 1.75 to 1, you do lose that little bit of space, but I think that was obviously just an artifact of having that framing and how it matched that particular shot. I do prefer having the film in 1.66 to 1. I like having that little bit of extra headroom if I was being able to choose between the aspect ratios. And honestly, with a film as important and iconic as Dr. No, it deserved a full deluxe release, and I think very easily could have had different aspect ratio presentations if it was being handled by a boutique label who would have actually cared to get the transfer right. So ideally, in a perfect world, I would hope that there was a release of the film that had at least both 1.66 and 1.75 presentations. You could also do a 1.85 presentation, but I do think that's a little too tight, but that, of course, would preserve the US aspect ratio. In any case, there is no issue with the film suddenly being in 1.75. It is one of the original ratios for presenting the film. It is framed very well and very generously, and there are no real issues from switching 1.66 to 1.75. This is a welcome sight, as when the special edition DVD was made, that was framed at 1.78 to 1, and when the special edition DVDs were made, the framing of the non-scope films wasn't always done as carefully as one would have hoped. Dr. No fares just fine, but I do feel like the framing here on the UHD is quite well done. In spite of these being new restorations and new scans, every once in a while you'll see a little bit of damage make its way through, whether it's a little speck or a fleeting scratch still kind of poking in, or an occasional fluctuation here and there that's very light. So here in Dr. No, there's maybe one or two of those. They're almost blink and you miss it, but they are there. So it's not a completely pristine restoration, but I will say that on all of these, it does seem to try and preserve the original filmic quality of all of the elements. A lot of the terrible choices that Lowry made and a lot of the changes they made have actually been undone because nobody did that silly stuff in the first place with these masters. So all of that is to be applauded. The main issue here with the visuals, once again, is the terrible and absolutely unacceptable frozen grain that runs throughout most of the entire film. Now, the encoding of this disc and all of the others in this release is quite good. It's actually surprisingly good for a Warner Studio disc. It's not great, as you'll note. The bitrate fluctuates quite wildly throughout the feature. It does remain at a consistent higher level, but even if you were just checking every once in a while as you watch the film, you'll notice it just going up and down like crazy. It'll spike up to over 100 megabits per second, then it'll drop down to 40 or less, and then, but it does consistently average between 60 to 80 or so megabits per second, sometimes 80 to 90, but I just wish the overall encoding of these would have been at a more consistently higher level. There are no issues with the encoding, but it is a bit disconcerting when you see it constantly fluctuating wildly. And then if you look at a bitrate graph, you'll also see that shown visually at just how much it's constantly going up and down. I can certainly say that I wish this had been encoded by Fidelity in Motion as the Warner Archive UHD of the Searchers was, because if anything deserves great encoding, one would think it is the James Bond films. So the UHD is an upgrade in terms of picture quality without question, but you have to live with the terrible and unacceptable frozen grain that runs throughout most of the feature. This should have never been okayed and accepted and released in this fashion, and it really boggles the mind why people think this is an acceptable practice after putting in all of this new effort in terms of scanning the original negative and doing a high-res scan and doing this restoration work and doing quite a good job of those elements. It's really fumbling the ball at the end of the process and negating a lot of the positive aspects of that work. So why this happened, I don't know, but this is the disc in the 6 films that is the most affected, and it is completely unacceptable. However, I still have to encourage people to get this UHD, as the Blu-ray is crap, as the Lowry master is crap, but also the new 4K master is a significant improvement even over the old 4K SDR master, but we've only had streaming low-quality versions of that. So visually, this is the best we've ever had for the film in terms of quality, but you have to now live with even more frozen grain problems than the old crap Lowry master. So that's the trade-off here. The encoding could be better, and the frozen grain is atrocious for most of the film. Now we turn to the audio, which is even more problematic than the picture, and the reason why I think this disc needs to be recalled most of all. The original mono mix is here, and it is finally on all releases worldwide, so everybody in the UK and Europe can finally hear some form of the original sound design and not have to deal with a remix. Unfortunately, the mono mix has not been restored at all. What they seem to have done is take the terrible sounding version from the Region A Blu-ray release. It's now in a lossless codec instead of a lossy one, and they seem to have just tweaked the sound a bit in terms of it's EQ'd a little bit differently. It sounds a little bit bassier now, like there's a bit more emphasis on the low end, but otherwise it's the same over noise reduced, over processed, scrubbed sounding, muffled mono track that is the original audio of the film sounding like a shadow of its former self. The sound quality of the original audio is unacceptably poor. There was no reason to do any of this. If you have any past releases of the film, even if you go back to versions that use the 1998 mastering, those will sound better. And then if you have versions from before that that use the 1992 or so MGM mastering, those will sound better than that. And if you have the Criterion Laserdisc, that is the best sounding version of all because no noise reduction was used. The track is completely untouched, and that's why it still sounds better than everything else and wipes the floor with everything else. Except they tried to fix the way the end music blares out on the final note of the James Bond theme by just splicing in a copy from, I think, a CD soundtrack, and it's really jarring and doesn't work, and they shouldn't have done that. So you have to take the Criterion mono track and then use the end of the MGM Laserdisc mono track to have the correct end title music. That's what I've had to do in the past, and that's how fans have to cobble together a proper archival version of the mono mix, since apparently the powers that be don't think it's important to properly restore and preserve the original audio mixes of the James Bond films, which are iconic for their genius and brilliant sound design. Honestly, I expected this release to probably just recycle the same mono track from the North American Blu-ray, so I'm not surprised the original mono has not been restored. However, I am surprised that they felt the need to tweak the audio a little bit further, but it is the same over-aggressively processed mono. It's just now a little bit more bass heavy, just a tad, and you'll only notice that if you compare them directly. But at least there's some form of the original audio here, and it's on all releases worldwide, but just keep in mind, it sounds horrible. And then we turn to the new Dolby Atmos remix of the film, which presumably was done by Warner as well. Again, there's no details or information given on how this process was done. This new Dolby Atmos remix has gotten a lot of positive reviews, and people will say that the only issue is that it's limited because it's working with a limited mono source element of a film from 1962, which also underscores the entire stupidity of the notion of why would a 1962 lower budgeted mono film need to get a brand new Dolby Atmos remix, especially when the original masters and original stems are long gone, and all that survives is the original mono track and then a partial composite of an isolated music and effects mono track that doesn't match the final edit of the film, and then maybe some pieces of some of the soundtrack cues you could get from another source. So there's no real reason to remix this film, especially since nobody's actually properly restored the original audio mix anyway. But this Dolby Atmos remix is the single worst aspect of this disc. It is the entire reason why I think this disc needs to be recalled. It makes the issues of the frozen grain and the picture transfer look like nothing. Because this Dolby Atmos remix is so overzealously processing the surviving audio elements that it has perhaps inadvertently caused a number of deletions throughout and practically murdered the original dialogue in terms of how over-aggressively it is now noise-reduced and processed to within an inch of its life. When you listen to this track, there are some gimmicky sound pans and overhead moments thrown in here and there, which is to be expected of somebody trying to take a mono track and bring it into Dolby Atmos. But when you listen closely, you'll note that most everything is still focused around the center channel as it's still a mono track. But the dialogue has been so overprocessed that there is an extreme noise gate in and around every line and word of dialogue, and you'll hear it shutting off the noise floor that has been completely eradicated when no one is talking, which makes every quiet scene sound completely dead in terms of just people in a room or an environment. When they stop talking, suddenly everything is dead quiet in an unnatural way. But the noise gate is so extreme that frequently parts of words and syllables are simply chopped off or not there. And this has also removed a lot of incidental sounds and sound effects and parts of the dialogue that aren't actual words. If people make a noise or something, it is now just completely gone. And this, again, makes certain shots and scenes now feel weird because now there are moments of silence that are unnatural and also were unintended and not done by the original production. The actual quality of the dialogue itself is now horribly over-manipulated and has almost phasey defects to it and sounds horribly tinny and canned, and it just sounds terrible. And it leads me to wonder that perhaps what may have been done is that they may have tried to use AI tools and technology to do a separation of the dialogue from the surviving mono-composite source. Basically, some of the same stuff that has been done with certain Beatles recordings and other things. And perhaps in doing that, there was also an over-aggressive noise reduction and noise gating that was used that inadvertently removed things that it thought were noise and such. And this, of course, was things that weren't dialogue and sound effects and parts of words and parts of syllables. And then on top of that, whenever there is music, it's flown in from the isolated music and effects track. And the reason I know this is because that was released once on a consumer format, which is the analog backup track on the Criterion Special Edition Laserdisc. That's partly why this release is so important, in addition to the famous, supposedly banned commentary track. When you listen to the isolated music and effects track on the Laserdisc, the quality is low because it's Laserdisc analog, but you can tell it's not exactly matching the film. It's seemingly from a slightly earlier version, as some of Monty Norman's music is not only louder in the mix, but the cues are different. It has some unique music that was not used in the film, but it doesn't match the music edits of how Peter Hunt and others edited the music in the final version of the film, and how they lowered some of the levels because they didn't actually like some of Norman's score and they were trying to make it better suit the action of the film. So it's a really remarkable thing to study and look at how the Norman score was spotted and mixed in the final mono mix of the film. But when you listen to this new Atmos remix on the UHD, it's plain as day that what they did was actually just use the isolated music and effects track, which apparently they have on hand, which makes no sense why it's never been released on another physical media release again, and why it's not included on this UHD, since there are no new extras, and Monty Norman's score has never seen an official release anywhere. So the only way you can actually hear it, for the most part, is this compromised mono isolated music and effects track. But the Atmos remix has most of the different music levels, the music not used in the film, all the stuff that you hear on the isolated music and effects track on the Criterion Laserdisc is pretty much replicated in the Atmos remix, which means it's making errors and mistakes because nobody bothered to check the sources they were using. And on top of that, it's not like they just used that and didn't use anything else. They messed with even that and caused some dramatic errors, particularly the one that I noticed first when I was checking through the Atmos remix and first realized how bad it actually was. In the confrontation with Mr. Jones after pulling the car off the the side of the road. The music was originally edited in the mono mix in a particular way to make it fit the scene and the punches in a particular fashion. Well, when you listen to the isolated M&E track, it's the original cue. It doesn't have that edit, so it sounds a little bit weird. But here in the Atmos, they took that and then tried to do their own weird sort of edit, so now it's really jarring. It no longer matches any of the edit, and it's actually off sync with the punches, so it is totally messed up. And on top of that, the isolated M&E track then has a little extra piece of music that plays faintly as Mr. Jones bites the cyanide cigarette on the hood of the car. Well, they managed to not have that either, so it's like they were sort of half-assed trying to match the actual film edit of the audio and the music, but also not really bothering to care that they got it right. Also, when the music pops up, it will frequently be flown in from the isolated M&E track or perhaps another source, and so now it sounds removed from the original mono mix elements. It sounds bigger. It's now in the stereo main channels for the most part, and the fidelity is different. But also when it's flown in, sometimes it's just literally placed over the original mono element. So in the airport arrival scene, when the James Bond theme comes up, there is actually one point in the Atmos remix where you hear the James Bond theme that's been laid in all of a sudden and is being moved around and brought up and down in volume levels due to the Atmos trying to pick up the cars going by in the background, because apparently somebody thought that was more important than anything going on in the scene. You will actually hear, if you listen closely, the James Bond theme is fighting itself because it's actually playing over and not synced up properly with the actual James Bond theme in the original mono element that they just tried to place this other version of the James Bond theme over. The film is riddled with defects, deletions, errors, portions of dialogue have been chopped off. There's one I found where one of Sean Connery's lines of dialogue is partially obscured at the front, and now instead of having words, starts with what sounds like a squeak or beeping noise. It is absolutely insane that this happened. This is completely unacceptable, and it is topped off by an unbelievably excessive amount of audio processing, noise reduction, and noise gating that butchers the quality of the original dialogue. And all you have to do, if you notice something that sounds weird to you, or you feel like something's missing, or you just think the Atmos sounds weird, if you switch over to the mono track on this disc, which again is a tweaked version of the crappy sounding mastering done for the Blu-ray release, it is a night and day difference, because you've at least got some form of the original audio. As poor as it's been made to sound, it does not have any problems, and at least will be reflecting the genius of the original sound design in spite of the limited budget they had to work with. So whatever you do not watch the UHD of Dr. No with the Atmos remix, which is so ungodly bad that it actually makes the old, terrible MiCasa 5.1 remix preferable. That is how agonizingly bad and infuriating this Atmos remix is. So I would say whatever you do, don't watch any of these UHDs with the Atmos remix, and especially do not watch any of the first 3 films with the Atmos remix, because guess what? All of the first 3 films in these Atmos remixes have the same exact problems of unbelievably excessive audio processing, with deletions and parts of words and syllables being obscured or deleted, playing around with the sound in ways that it was never designed to be heard in. They are just unbelievable, and it's presumably because they are the 3 films that don't have all of their audio master materials surviving, and so instead of restoring the original mono, or at least trying to do something that was a basic stereo tasteful remixing of what elements that survived, they just decided to go crazy with whatever tools they had in their toy box and not care about how they were destroying the sound of the James Bond films. Now, the other 3 films, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever, fare differently in their Atmos remixes, and I will cover those when I cover the respective UHDs of those films. But for all of these, you should always stick with the original mono options, and thankfully you have original mono presentations for all 6 films on these, and that is on all releases worldwide. But the Atmos remixes in particular on the first 3 films, and especially on Dr. No, are some of the worst remixes I've ever encountered. They are so bad that they are an insult to the film and the original production team. They should have never gotten past a quality control check. They should have never been approved. They should have never been put on these discs and released. And for that reason, above anything else, at the very least, the first 3 UHDs in this set should be recalled, so these monstrosities can be stripped away and destroyed, and then hopefully the original mono tracks could be properly restored, because to get the best fidelity, at least for the first 3 films, you do have to go back quite a ways and patch together your own fan-made restorations of the audio tracks from far superior sources that don't have excessive overprocessing. And I'd also like to add that anyone who gave the Atmos remixes on this set a positive review, especially the Atmos remixes for the first 3 films, anyone who gave them a positive review or said they were great or praised them either does not know these films very well, does not know the original sound design of these films, wasn't paying attention, or doesn't know what they're talking about, because it is plain as day how overprocessed and completely defective they are. Even if you don't know the film all that well, you can start to notice deletions and things that sound weird. And average viewers are actually noticing some of the things that are missing, whether it be elements of the Dr. No audio, or even iconic sounds such as the door slam into the opening titles of Goldfinger being gone on the Atmos, or the introduction of James Bond being actually clipped in the Goldfinger Atmos remix. So these are a major problem, and Warner has done disc recalls for audio issues before, never properly restoring audio typically, but these remixes are so bad, they are the single greatest example of bad audio presentations that warrant a disc recall that I have ever experienced, outside of, something being defective for a technical disc pressing reason or something. So if you can't tell, I got really hot and bothered over these, and I have now started rewatching the UHDs in their entirety with these atrocious Atmos remixes, taking extensive notes, because I will also be making comparison videos showing every single defect I can possibly find, and there's so many that I probably won't find them all. That's how bad these are. So I will be working on those. I have to get a better way of actually capturing UHD discs so I can then edit these together. I'll probably have a lot of issues running into copyright flags here on YouTube, but I do plan on doing this however I have to do it, and they will be non-monetized, just so I can show how excruciatingly bad and insulting these remixes are. They should have never been released. They are completely defective, and they should be removed, and the original audio should finally be properly restored, which it has not been. So now we turn to the packaging and artwork of the Sean Connery 6-film collection sets. This is only available in a standard standalone keep case set, and then the more expensive limited steelbook version. The US releases do not contain Blu-ray discs, they only contain UHDs, which is common Warner practice. However, the British and European releases do contain Blu-rays, but instead of them being remastered Blu-rays of these new 4K masters, which should have been made for all of the releases, they are instead the same old crappy Blu-rays, so they really are pointless. But that is also a common Warner practice of including the past old Blu-ray in a new pressing in a new UHD release for the European market. Now, the Steelbook set is at least $50 more than the standard release. Both are quite pricey for being just new UHDs without any real swag or printed materials or new supplements or anything to warrant a higher price tag. However, the $150 limited Steelbook set does have an attractive metal case that does have the period-appropriate 1960s 007 logo and gun symbol. So that's a nice touch, and it is in in keeping with the Steelbook metal cases for the Warner pricey Steelbook limited sets. The side is open and exposed, as are the other Warner sets, so it's just the Steelbooks in foam. The images chosen for the Steelbooks themselves are very uninspired. They merely took some production stills of Connery and then another production still for the back. So here on Dr. No, it's Connery sitting in the scene that they shot where Honey Rider gives her backstory, and the rear has a still of Bond and Honey on the beach, which would have been a better choice for the cover. Then the interior art is just a single black and white still of Bond behind the wheel of the Sunbeam Alpine during the chase. There's also a limited certificate of authenticity in this set, and that's really all you're getting for your extra $50 plus tax over the standard release. So I really don't think it's worth it to go for the Steelbook release unless you absolutely insist on having to have the Steelbook packaging. Now, the standard release retails for $100, which is a bit pricey for just having 6 UHDs and nothing else. There are no Blu-rays in this package, remember. This has the new artwork that I've discussed in a previous video, which at least does look a little bit better when you have it in your hand, but this is still a very perplexing and baffling choice of just taking the Japanese posters primarily for Dr. No and Goldfinger and then just sort of chopping them up along with what seems to maybe be some of the Japanese poster for You Only Live Twice, and then doing this sort of torn picture collage effect, and then having the Sean Connery collection in this sort of teal color in between the sort of torn picture spaces. I don't know what they were thinking with this. I mean, yeah, it's cool. You use some original Japanese poster art, which is very striking and unique, but it's not like they have all the films represented on here or any rhyme or reason to why this was done. And it's unknown whether the other sets will follow this aesthetic or if this will just be a one-off. But this is just really bizarre. I don't hate it, but I don't understand it. I don't really like it. I don't really have any use for it. And I think it's truly bizarre to not have at least some representation of all 6 films, or at least something that felt at least a little bit cohesive. So I will say that the actual printing on the slipcover is nice enough, and it does look better when you have it in your hands as opposed to just looking at a picture online, but it's still very lackluster and random looking. The top on the slipcover does have the slight reflective quality as Warner does on their slipcovers. We have this new title font also for the spine. The other side of the spine has a little bit of wraparound with the poster art and has the UHD logo and the 007 logo, but of course here on the other side it's flipped, so you have to turn it upside down to actually have it properly oriented. And if you want it displayed on your shelf right side up with the spine facing out, you've got to just put your copy of the set in on your shelf backwards. So yeah, I don't know why they felt the need to wrap the art around one side but not the other, and it's just, yeah, I don't know if people really thought about what they were doing. Another thing that you'll notice is there is a little bit of a sort of matte reflective finish on how well it comes across on camera, but on the actual poster images, there's just a little bit of a nice finish to them. So at least the slipcover does feel a little bit nicer. The rear has the same finish on it, so we have the image of Connery and then the typical Warner bar of information on the bottom. And then interestingly, the 6 images of Connery are actually the 6 images used for the Steelbook. So you get the same random basic stills represented here. So in case you were curious and you didn't get the Steelbook set, you can actually see the uninspired looks of what the Steelbooks look like. The case has the same art, but obviously the slipcover has the fancier printing. We have the same text on the spine. The rear has the credits for each film and the same image of Connery. Now inside there is a digital copy insert which is included, but I don't think it's been confirmed that it actually has the new 4K masters on there. I think I've seen various reports that people redeem them and it's still versions of the old HD Lowry masters, so that is a problem that needs to be addressed. I myself never use digital copies as I find them useless and I don't stream anything to begin with because I'm a physical media person and like to watch films in their best quality. But if you do invest in releases and utilize the digital copy, it is quite possible that it will not be for the new 4K restoration and that it may be for an old version or quite possibly the old crap Lowry master. So inside you just have the discs themselves in a hinge tray. Apologies, I have my disc of From Russia with Love still in my player because I'm still currently reviewing every aspect of that disc. But they are just generic labels. There is nothing special about them. There are no inserts. There's nothing in terms of a booklet or anything. So the only thing inside the case besides the generic looking disc is, of course, the digital copy insert. And if you're a longtime fan and you look at these disc labels, you might feel they look strangely familiar in a way, in spite of having a colored background. And that is because they are literally the labels from the old Blu-rays, just with a different colored background and not having the Blu-ray bar or logos on them. Basically, if you take the Blu-ray disc of Dr. No and put it side by side with the UHD of Dr. No, as you can see, the font of all of these is exactly the same. We have the same 007 logo in the center, and the only thing that has changed is, again, changing the black backgrounds to a specific color for each disc, removing the Blu-ray bar at the bottom, and putting on the modern UHD and studio logos. So even the labels have nothing new to them and are frankly another sign of how much corner cutting was done in regards to releasing the films on UHD. Now, the color choice on each disc does at least reflect the color that's chosen for the menu bar and menu system in terms of how the Warner Studio label does its disc menus and authoring. So when you look at each disc menu, you are looking at the same still of Connery holding the air pistol from the From Russia with Love photo shoots over a black background with the 007 logo featuring a collage of different poster images from the Connery era, which is a far better piece of art that would have been great for the cover of the set, but that would have been actually thinking about having nice art on a release. But then each of the menu screens just changes the title for the respective film. Otherwise, it's the same menu image used for all of them. And then the Warner menu bar system will be the color of the disc label that you've inserted. So that's the only thing differentiating the menus, as otherwise they are ultra generic and are the same typical slow to load, more frustrating, basic Warner menu design. Also, the menus just play the original James Bond theme taken from a soundtrack copy, so at least it's period appropriate, but there's no music or sounds respective to each individual film. It's just the same generic menu over and over for all 6. Now to turn to the supplemental features. There are, of course, no new supplements for any of these releases. They merely recycle the legacy extras originally generated for Laserdisc, the Special Edition DVDs, and the 2006 Ultimate Edition DVDs. The extras that were upgraded to HD for certain Blu-rays are the versions used here. However, you have to go through all of the supplements on these releases because they were not ported over properly or they were not done with a lot of care or attention paid to them, like every aspect of these releases. So on some discs, you will find some of the extras have different video levels in terms of the contrast and video black and things. So sometimes the encoding isn't the greatest, sometimes they're in a different frame rate. They look presentable overall for the most part, but you have to scrutinize on all of them. And typically when you're looking at older legacy extras, when they're ported over, they're almost never as good as they were on the original respective releases or ones that had care put into how they were encoded. So that's a reason to hang on to your Ultimate Edition DVD or Blu-ray copies. But also there are 2 supplements that are dropped from this release. So this has everything that was on the Dr. No Blu-ray, including the HD update made to the main documentary and the piece on Terrence Young and other things. But what has been removed are, firstly, the sort of throwaway mission control option that merely allowed you to replay clips from the film that never made any sense why that was there. So that has been removed, and I never really considered that an extra in the first place. But the 2 legitimate extras that are no longer here, one, the image gallery montages are gone. So there are no production stills or anything. And on the past releases, you could watch these little video portions that would just go through relatively decent quality versions of original production stills. So it's a shame that none of the original publicity and production stills are on this disc in any form, and it's surprising why somebody would feel the need to drop those since they brought over everything else. The other piece that is removed is the Lowry Digital restoration piece that was on the Ultimate Edition DVD and Blu-ray. This runs about 12 or so minutes, and it's Lowry talking about the process they undertook and talking about how great they think it is and how great their work is on these. And for years, I just would have to sit through that thing and grit my teeth and grumble like crazy, if not facepalm, and try to not start yelling. But anyway, that has understandably been removed because it has nothing to do with the new 4K UHD and 4K restoration of the films. But for posterity's sake, you should hang on to your older copies just to have all of the extras that have ever been created for the films, and also having them in the best presentations you can. So on the UHD, you will find a mixture of HD and standard definition presentations of varying quality, of course, due to how they're encoded, of all the legacy extras that were on the Blu-ray, including the HD updates to some of the documentary pieces. You basically have everything but the mission control option, the piece on Lowry Digital's restoration process in 2006, and you also lose the image gallery portions. Now, I didn't really notice major quirks and issues with the legacy extras on Dr. No, except for the end of the audio commentary track, which for some reason suddenly drops in quality, gains a certain process sound effect to the voice, and it's at the very end of the track when John Cork is doing the sign-off portion. And I'm thinking perhaps this might be because they were worried about the timing of the film with the new logos that bookended in terms of the modern MGM Amazon one, or it may just be an error, and since this set has a number of errors, I'm thinking it may just be that. Thankfully, it's just the very tail end of the commentary when it's wrapping up, but as the commentary is the most important of all of the extras and the most rewarding aspect of the fantastic supplements that were produced for the Bond films, it's really a shame that there was an issue with porting over the audio commentary. There should be no issue with porting over the same audio commentary track, but there's even a problem there. It's thankfully minor and at the very end, but it's definitely a problem. Now, there are, of course, no new supplements and seemingly no budget for them, and Warner typically never does new supplements. If they do one, it's usually just some talking heads and famous people in a short featurette that's like 15 to 20 minutes long, and it's a surprise when they even do one of those. However, there are at least 2 things they could have added to this release that wouldn't have been new supplements, but they would have been welcome sights and would have made this something that fans would have been over the moon about. The first would have been to license and obtain the famous Criterion Collection Laserdisc commentary with very off-the-cuff comments from original production and crew members. This has become infamous in certain circles, but is not the sort of unbelievable, politically incorrect thing it's made out to be. It's a treasure for those wanting to know more about the Bond films and is an invaluable resource for even the Bond historians writing official books. And since a lot of the individuals were not with us for very much longer after those recordings, they are invaluable primary sources to study. They are only on the first pressing Criterion Collection Special Edition Laserdisc, as Cubby Broccoli and Eon requested that they be removed because they weren't really consulted about them much in the first place. So there was a bit of back and forth, and they were basically removed. They have been preserved by fans, and you can easily find versions of them floating around online, but they've never been on another official release, and now would have been the perfect time to get with Criterion and make some sort of arrangement, since Warner and Criterion have a good working relationship now. There was really no reason why they couldn't do this. There might still be some resistance from Eon and perhaps some individuals involved in all of this who might not want them there, but it would have been something that fans would have truly appreciated, and it would have been something that would have made this release much more attractive and actually brought something new to the extras. But Criterion doesn't really license their old Laserdisc commentaries all that much, so it's more of a pipe dream, but it would have been nice had they at least tried, or if they could have gotten that on here. That's the one possible extra that's a pipe dream, admittedly, but it would have been fantastic to have. The one thing they could have done and should have done is include the isolated music and effects track, which is only available on the Criterion CAV Special Edition LD as Laserdisc analog. And the reason why this should be on the UHD is we have clear evidence that they used it in their piece of filth Atmos defective remix. So there is literally no reason why the perfectly fine source that they used could not have been included as a secondary audio track. And having a brand new transfer of the music and effects track for Dr. No in higher quality than what it is on the Criterion Laserdisc analog track would have made the entire purchase of the UHD worth it, because that is the only major source for Monty Norman's score, and it has notable differences and extra pieces of music that are not used in the film. And this also goes for From Russia with Love and Goldfinger. They have exclusive music to them as well, and in terms of Goldfinger, that is the only known source for some of John Barry's soundtrack cues, which are not part of the soundtrack master, and which is why they couldn't be included in the La La Land restoration of the score. So these are extraordinarily important isolated music and effects tracks, and there was literally no reason why they couldn't be included on these releases. It's just that I'm sure nobody thought about it, and nobody cared to even think about, hey, can we put anything extra on these to at least act like we give a damn? So the Criterion Laserdisc commentary being included is more of a fan dream. I can understand why that probably will never get released again. But the isolated music and effects track should be here and should have been included, and that would have been something truly wonderful to see, because we know they have a copy of it because they used big chunks of it in their crap Atmos remix. So that is the 4K UHD release of Dr. No, found in the Sean Connery 6-film collection set and steelbook variant. To say that this is a frustrating, infuriating mixed bag of a release that could have been perfect is an understatement. I still have to recommend that people purchase this release, even though it is a little bit pricey for sure, because the new scan is fantastic. The work that was done on the front end is great. And it is so far superior to the piece of crap Lowry master we've had for almost 20 years that it's worth every penny just to get away from that. But you've got to deal with the horrible, unforgivably bad frozen grain that lasts through most of the feature. You've got to deal with almost every element of this release featuring typical and even above average levels of Warner corner cutting, and this also may be MGM involved, because again, they don't tell us anything about how this stuff was done or who did what. Thankfully, the original mono track is here in some form on all releases worldwide, but it is a terribly overprocessed version that sounds terrible, and it's tweaked even further from how it sounded on the Blu-ray release, which already was unacceptably poor. So you have to restore the original mono track yourself. And there's no reason Warner and MGM couldn't have done this had they actually bothered to worry about restoring the original audio for the film that they were restoring. But then you come to the unforgivably defective, error-ridden Atmos remix from hell that should have never been approved or released, and that is so bad it should get the disc recalled. And what makes the Atmos remix even worse is if you are watching the film with the mono mix, and this goes for all the discs in this set, and if you happen to stop the disc for any reason and come back to resume it later, the disc will start up and then automatically default to the Atmos remix anyway, even if you were watching with the mono mix. It will resume at the exact same place as the UHD is designed to do with auto resume, but it defaults back to the Atmos remix, and you have to physically and manually switch back to the original audio option. That is a major problem as well. So even if you don't want the defective Atmos remix from hell, if you stop the film and resume it, you're gonna be stuck with that Atmos remix from hell again. It will force you to resume with that, and you will have to manually disable it again. And in terms of the rest of the aspects of the disc release, there's no real signs that anybody tried to make this special or high-end or worth your $100 or $150 plus tax that you're having to plunk down for this. The encoding is very good, but not ever great. The artwork is lackluster and uninspired and in some aspects quite baffling. There are no Blu-rays that are remastered from the new transfer that are included whatsoever. The digital copies may not redeem the new 4K masters and may instead give you some version of the old crappy Lowry master. The legacy extras have been ported over for the most part, but not all of them are here. And on top of that, not all of them are properly encoded or presented to look as good as they did on past releases. So you have to pay special attention to those to make sure that you at least note the ones that have issues and quirks and problems. And again, as I mentioned, you have to go on a case-by-case basis looking at each film's UHD and looking at its transfer and its audio and its supplements. You have to study each disc. You can't just look at the set as a whole and say a particular level of quality for everything overall, because the quality varies wildly. In fact, it varies so much film to film, it's almost as if two different teams of people worked on these releases, as some films fare much better than others, and some fare much worse in certain areas. So the picture quality and presentation actually varies on a technical level, just as the audio quality varies on a technical level. So I do think several discs in this set need to be recalled, chiefly among them Dr. No, which has an unforgivable picture problem in terms of the frozen grain that's rampant, but most of all for the hideous presentation of the audio that not only has a over-manipulated, low-quality version of the mono mix, but an absolutely insultingly bad defective Atmos remix that should have never seen the light of day on a disc release. So this, for me, is one of the Warner discs that needs a recall to fix audio problems, simply because people couldn't be bothered to get it right in the first place and restore the original mono track. I don't see them doing that, so if they did a disc recall, I'm sure all they could probably do is remove the defective Atmos remix and simply put back the 5.1 MiCasa Studios remix, and I'm sure the mono mix would remain unchanged, even though they could very easily at least go back to the pre-existing mono used on the Criterion and MGM Laserdisc back in the early 1990s and make a proper transfer of that with a correct end music section. And if they did that, I'd have no problems, because at least the mono would sound as good as it ever has. But this is Warner we're talking about, and they don't do things like that. So if they did a disc recall, all they would probably do is swap out the defective Atmos for the old crappy 5.1 remix. But even that would be better, because this Atmos is that bad, it makes the old crappy 5.1 remix sound good in comparison. And that 5.1 remix was horrible to begin with. So whatever you do, do not watch this UHD with the Atmos remix. Don't watch any of the first 3 films with the Atmos remix because they have the same problems to varying degrees. So I have to still encourage fans to pick up this set, probably wait until it goes on sale, as it is definitely expensive for what it is. You're only getting 6 UHDs, and outside of the collectability of steelbooks, I think the steelbook set is really pointless for just giving you some steel cases that'll probably be damaged in transit when you get them, and then you get a paper certificate saying you paid an extra $50 for a steelbook set. The transfers inside are improvements, yes. They do have original audio for all the films, yes. Is it what it could be? No. Is it what a boutique label would have put into these releases? No. Is it what the Bond films deserve? No. Was it worth the 19 years of suffering through the crap Lowry masters and MiCasa 5.1 remixes to get this? No, it's not what it should be. And there's no reason for that other than people making decisions who don't care about preserving films properly, or are simply doing things with automated processes. So if it's either of those or a combination of those factors, I don't know, but that's what you're looking at. So you get several definite improvements. Every aspect of this disc is filled with corner cutting and a lack of care, and then technically some downgrades, particularly in the audio department, which is a downgrade in both tracks. And again, the Atmos remix is so defective and error-ridden and so tries to manipulate the original audio to where it doesn't even sound like itself anymore frequently, that it should never be used by anyone ever and should have never been released, and is the number one reason why the UHD of Dr. No needs to be recalled, if only to strip it from the disc so it will never be in circulation ever again. So those are my thoughts on the UHD release of Dr. No, which is a sad, frustrating affair that had no reason to be any of those. Every problem I've highlighted was completely avoidable. Every problem I've highlighted would have not been a problem had this been a process carried out by people who put in the effort and actually cared to get things right and actually restore the original audio track. I know fans, and myself included, always dream about having a deluxe release with a lot of care put in, that a boutique label might get their hands on an iconic film from a studio. And obviously, not every film can get that treatment, but a lot of times, the more famous a film is, the more it suffers from being so famous, of not being able to be licensed to people who will put in the time and care to get things right and make a release that could be called archival, or having more eyes on it of people who don't know anything about how to preserve films or the technical aspects of doing a film transfer and doing a disc release, or applying techniques that are in vogue at the time to ostensibly make a release more appealing to the average consumer or viewer of something, that are in direct contrast to how the film was originally made and presented. So unfortunately, once again, the Bond films face the same problem they always have on releases. There are advancements here, but there are so many, and in fact, I think all aspects of this release show extreme corner cutting and lack of care and effort. And then several aspects are downgrades, and chiefly of all, the Atmos remix is a remix from hell. It is one of the worst remixes I have ever experienced, and is so chock full of errors and deletions and overprocessing of sound that it is an absolute insult to Bond fans everywhere and an insult to the original production team of Dr. No. So I still have to encourage fans to pick up this quite pricey release, because the new scans themselves are such an improvement, but they've been really incompetently handled in a number of areas, and there was no reason for that. The quality level you're going to experience in picture and sound varies from film to film, so do keep all of this in mind, but also know that you're going to have to live with new headaches and problems, and if you want proper audio presentations for the films, you do have to do work yourself and make your own version, because you have to do the work that the studios simply couldn't be bothered to do. And had we been lucky enough for the Bond films to get licensed to a boutique label, we wouldn't really be talking about these kinds of issues. So I will be going through one film at a time in its own standalone review, because you really do have to scrutinize that much, and none of them are at the level they should be. Some, thankfully, fare better than others, but the worst of them is unfortunately Dr. No, which is truly sad, as the scan itself is excellent, and had this been handled by people who actually cared to get things right, it would have been a stupendous UHD and could have possibly been the definitive home video release the film has never gotten, nor has any release of the original James Bond films ever gotten a truly definitive release that could be called archival. So as always, I hope my babblings about the world of James Bond and the never-ending madness of the video transfers of the original series always being problematic has been at least somewhat fun and informative. I know it's not the sort of news that any Bond fan wants to hear, but you do need to go into this release expecting and knowing that none of the films have received the proper tender loving care that they've so desperately needed for all of these decades. And I think more reviews should reflect this. And the fact that the completely and obviously defective Atmos remix has not been discussed more openly on the internet, I think is ridiculous, as even average viewers are noticing some of the problems with the Atmos remixes on the first 3 films specifically. So there are major technical problems in the audio of this set, and if any disc was to be recalled, it should be Dr. No. In any event, please do keep supporting both studios and boutique labels by buying films on disc, even when they're compromised as hell for no reason like this, because at least there are some unbelievably necessary improvements, and you can use elements of this release to try and cobble together your own fan-made version that at least is better or is as good as you can possibly make it, and thus once again be outdoing the lackluster efforts of studios. But in purchasing physical media releases, even when they're screwy as heck as this one is, you're helping to ensure both physical media and film culture survive. So definitely keep bonding, and as always, thank you ever so much for watching.
Take a look at this video Geiger reading. Those transfer samples raw 4K scan brought back from Warner UHD were overprocessed. Yet the video mastering engineer told me they were worthless chunks of video files.
He's either a bad studio man or a poor restorationist.
And I intend to find out which. Quarrel, how soon can you get us over to Warner UHD?
Well, it's like this here, Captain. Commander Raw 4K Scan, he done take samples of all the disk islands. Supposing we start checking the nearest ones first.
No. Warner UHD's the one I'm interested in.
I done take the commander there. We got away without trouble. It don't do for a man to tempt Providence too often. You see, there's a video dragon.
What?
Native superstition. Started by Dr. Warner MGM, probably.
Drop it, engineer, I'm behind you. It's funny, I thought you'd turn up sooner or later. Sit down.
The press release talked.
But of course, I was suspicious at the Queen's Video Club anyhow when it turned out you were the only one who'd seen Raw 4K Scan's monomix. And then later at the lab, you made no reference to the fact that Raw 4K Scan samples were overprocessed.
Very clever, Mr. Crusader. But you're up against more than you know. You shoot my disc and you'll end up like Raw 4K Scan.
And you killed it?
It was killed, but never mind how.
Who are you working for, engineer?
Well, you might as well know, as you won't live to use the information. I'm working for...
That's a 6-film UHD collection. And you've had your 6 chances to get it right. For me, Warner UHD is going to be a gentle relaxation.
From what? Dis?
No, from being a clay pigeon reviewer. Underneath the 4K tree, my honey and me.
Who is that?
It's all right. I'm not supposed to be here either. I take it you're not. Are you alone?
What are you doing here? Looking for scans?
No, I'm just looking.
Stay where you are.
I promise I won't steal your scans.
I promise you won't either. Stay where you are.
I can assure you my intentions are strictly film nerd honorable.
All right. You've been warned. This is it.
Lie still. It won't last long. They don't really know we're here.
Fire! I told you there was something wrong about this place.
That was a revisionism gun, not a video dragon.
Oh, there's a video dragon here, too. She's right.
You've seen it.
Yes, I have. He had 2 great glaring HDR eyes, short tail, and iffy encode. He was breathing Atmos fire. You don't believe me, do you? Little gal I does. I tell you, Mr. Crusader, let's get the hell out of here.
Listen, both of you. There are no such things as video dragons. What you saw was something that looked like one. I'm trying to think of what it was.
How do you know there aren't? Anyhow, what do you know about film transfers? Did you ever see a DVD rot? Or a CED with playback issues skip itself to death? Or a VCR eat its VHS tape after finishing a film?
I hate to admit it, but I haven't.
Well, I have. I never met a video detective before. Are you going to arrest Dr. Warner MGM?
Well, someone is. We can't have them trying to kill every film. A video dragon that runs on film revision engines. You can forget the spook squad. When it gets within range, you take the automated process driver. I'll take the video and audio processing.
Get inside. Keep an eye on the reviewer, and be careful. They've been in the swamp and they're contaminated with audio fidelity. Check that transfer Geiger reading. He's reading 95, Chief. Too much for the monitor. Scrub the fidelity down with audio processing, but quick. Reading 72.8% fidelity. The fidelity soaked into all their clothes. All right then, take off all their clothes. Use the high temperature noise reduction. Full pressure. 68. Reading 47%. All right then, put the reviewer through. He's now clocking 40% fidelity. It is still high. Reading 38, 32, down to 8% fidelity. He's now 18. He's now at 8% fidelity. Practically zero. She's clear. Good, get the man ready. He's got a count of 4. Check his fingernails. Put your hands in there. He's okay. I will notify reception they're coming through. De-restoring here. They're coming through now. Free Blu-ray copies? There's Warner, there's MGM, and there's UHD. Don't hesitate to ring if there's anything else you want. Anything at all.
Such as the raw 4K scans of the James Bond films.
I'll leave you two dear people in peace. Come and look.
Artificial light. We could be hundreds of feet beneath the video sea here.
And look at that. Studio claims. They do not grow above 200 feet.
$1 million, Mr. Crusader. You were wondering what it cost. As a matter of fact, I was. Forgive my not shaking hands. It becomes a bit awkward with these. A misfortune. You are admiring my press release. Yes, it's quite impressive. A unique feat of engineering, if I may say so. I designed it myself. The screen is convex, 10 inches thick, which accounts for the magnifying effect. Minnows pretending they're whales. Just like you on this UHD, Dr. Warner MGM. It depends, Mr. Crusader, on which side of the glass you are. A 4K HDR UHD 1.75 to 1 ratio, some form of original audio, Dolby Atmos remix, hideously defective. Dolby Vision? Of course. We'll have dinner at once. There's so much to discuss, so little time. Well, Dr. Warner MGM, you haven't done badly considering. A handicap is what you make of it. I was the unwanted child of a studio merger and a film studio of good family. Yet I became treasurer of the most powerful film library in Hollywood. It's rare for the studios to trust anyone who isn't completely in-house. I doubt they shall do so again. I escaped to another studio with 10,000 of their films in ruins. That's how you financed this operation. It was a good idea to use HDR power. I'm glad to see you can handle it properly. I'd hate to think that your overprocessing chamber was too effective. My work has given me a unique knowledge of revisionism, but not without costs, as you see. Yes. Your power source had our organization puzzled for some time. They are still puzzled, Mr. Crusader. Not any longer. I sent a complete report. Bluff, Mr. Crusader. You've not contacted your forum headquarters since you last viewed a UHD. But there are so many files on you open already, Dr. Warner MGM. My own, the forums, the one from the films that you revised. When trouble comes, you'll find this is a very small and naked little transfer. An expendable little transfer, Mr. Crusader. When my mission here on Dr. No is accomplished, I leave it to be stuck this way indefinitely and move on. But the habit of inquiry is consistent. I see you're wondering why, where, when. I only gratify your curiosity because you're the one man I've met capable of appreciating what I've done and keeping it to himself. Just a minute. There's no point in involving the film fan at this stage. She has nothing to do with us. Let her go free. She'll promise not to talk. No, I won't. I'm staying with you. I don't want you here. I agree. This is no place for the girl. Take her away. No. No. I'm sure the guards will amuse her. That's a North by Northwest 4K UHD. It would be a pity to break it. I prefer the raw 4K scan myself. Clumsy effort, Mr. Crusader. You disappoint me. I'm not a fool, so please do not treat me as one. Well, we can't all be geniuses, can we? Tell me, does the revising of classic films really compensate for having no revenue? Revisionist masters are only the first step to prove our power. Our power? With your disregard for film life, you must be working for the CEO. CEO, fans, just points of the compass, each as stupid as the other. I'm a member of Video Spectre. Video Spectre? Video Spectre. Special Executive for Counter-Video Archival Presentations, Video Terrorism, Revisionism, Extortion of Consumers' Wallets. The 4 great cornerstones of studio power, headed by the greatest brains in the world. Correction. Corporate brains. The successful corporate brain is always superior. It has to be. Well, why become corporate? I'm sure the fans would welcome a preservation scientist of your caliber. The fans are fools. I offered my services, they refused. So did the rights holders. Now they can both pay for their mistake. Studio domination. The same old dream. Our asylums are full of people who think they're Zaslav. Or God.
You persist in trying to provoke me, Mr. Crusader. I could have had you killed in the video swamp.
And why didn't you?
I thought you less stupid. Usually when a reviewer gets in my way. But you were different. You cost me time, money, effort. You damaged my organization. And my pride. I was curious to see what kind of a reviewer you were. I thought there might even be a place for you with Video Spectre.
Well, I'm flattered. I'd prefer the revenge department.
Of course, my first job would be finding the label who killed the 4K scan of Dr. No and the audio mix. Unfortunately, I misjudged you. You are just a stupid fanboy, whose luck has run out. They're waiting for you in the control room, Dr. Warner MGM. No hurry. They won't have started their countdown check yet.
You won't get away with it, Dr. Warner MGM. The Bond fans are prepared for any trouble.
I never fail, Mr. Crusader.
What do we do with him?
Soften him up. I haven't finished with him yet.
Stand by. Run to full power. Revisionist video elements 21.
Attention all controls. Going into operation now.
Stop! Stop, you fools! It's running wild! Shut down! We've remuxed the Laserdisc audio to the UHD.
What are we going to do now?
Well, we can test our fan-made MKV file with corrected, theatrical restored audio we'd made ourselves.
Ahoy, Mr. Crusader! Ahoy, Mr. Crusader!
Well, well, what's the matter? Do you need help?
Quite sure you don't.
Well, now that you're here, you better give us a disc replacement program.
Throw us your defective disc.